All right, hello everyone and welcome. This is the 200th Scientific Governance and Risk meeting here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am a governance facilitator here at Maker, joined live by a bunch of awesome people who are interested in working and developing the Maker protocol, and I'm sure plenty of people afterwards watching the recording as well. We do have a few ground rules, agenda, all that fun stuff to get into. But I did want to take a moment just to acknowledge the 200th meeting. Perhaps it's silly, but it's quite impressive. See that 200 there. I know personally, the governance and risk call was like my first foray kind of into Maker, right? I found the forum, and then the calls were kind of the next place where I felt like I could really get involved. And yeah, I still love showing up here every Thursday. So thank you to all the really wonderful people that make these calls happen and help further this community. Cool. If we have some time at the end, we can maybe share some memories and stuff, but I'll cap it at that for our 200th episode remembrance. All right, like I said, there are a few ground rules for these calls. As you notice, we're being recorded. So hello if you're watching on YouTube. Let's try not to talk over one another, because that's really annoying, both live and in the recording. There are a few features you can use that'll kind of help moderation and making sure that people feel free to speak and use the floor. First of which is the raise hand function for Zoom. You'll find that under reactions if you're using kind of the full suite. I think it is in a different part for mobile. The other thing you can do is drop any questions or comments in the chat. If you're unable or otherwise unwilling to hop on the mic, we'll circle back to them in a reasonable time. But yeah, just a final call that, this is meant to be an open experience. If you have questions, comments, concerns, we do really encourage you getting involved so everyone can kind of benefit from your perspective. Cool. So we got the agenda laid out in front of us. As usual, we'll be starting with our governance roundup, covering the most recent votes, what's going on with Maker improvement proposals, and the latest from the forum. We don't have any initiative update presentations today, but do have two solid discussion topics. The first being the new GHO proposal from AAVE for their own stablecoin, kind of talking about how that might affect Maker and any changes we might need to be prepared to do in light of that project. And then our final topic is MKR token decentralization. We had an awesome post from the strategic finance guys, kind of showing some metrics on decentralization, and figured that might be a cool topic to engage with this group. All right, that's enough intro blabbering. We'll get into the governance roundup now. On the votes end, it was fairly quiet this week with no polls concluding. So still plenty of time to express your opinions on the two ongoing ones, one of which is the green light poll for backed finance, the short-term bond ETF. And then we'll cover our ratification poll in the next segment that follows this. Next up, we have executive proposals. You might recall there was no executive proposal yesterday. We didn't have a lot scheduled, plus have a large chunk of the dev talent over in Paris for EthCC. So the next executive will be getting posted the following Wednesday, next Wednesday, and is expected to contain both the SocGen and Huntington Valley Bank onboardings. So keep an eye out for those. Next, we have our MIP segment. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Pablo.
Thank you, Peyton, and hello, everyone. Pablo here with a new MIPS update. So it's the second and last week of ratification polls for July. Ratification polls will close on Monday, the 25th. I'm using the plural, but we actually have only one ongoing ratification poll for this cycle, which is Patrick Chase facilitator onboarding proposal, which has unanimous flawless approval. So good for you, Patrick. And that's the only ratification poll which will close on Monday. Let's move on for proposals in RFC. Flawless victory. Oh, that's broken. So we have two top-level MIPs, MIP 76, the Merkle-Shire Redux, which was initially introduced as a special purpose fund and rejected, and is now being reworked into a top-level MIP that addresses some of the concerns that its SPF incarnation raised. And also MIP 72, which would authorize 𝘱𝑗's capital as a real-world asset arranger for MakerDAO. Then we have a proper special purpose fund. Recognized delegate 𝘱𝘰𝘮𝑚 Barrington proposes the creation of an SPF to retain her as a full-time interim chief legal officer of MakerDAO for 6 months. And there are 2 coordinated budget proposals in RFC, both of which are eligible to enter the August governance cycle. One for the DAI Foundation core unit, which includes multiple options that cover bear and super bear market scenarios. And one for the Oracle's core unit, which provides as options either a reiteration of their previous budget or a new budget reduced by 10%, bundled with an exemption from further reductions for 1 year. We have a couple of well, not actually a couple of coordinated forwarding proposals, 3 set of proposals to forward 3 core units, the events core unit, strategic happiness, and immune-fi security. Only the only forwarding proposal that is eligible to enter the August governance cycle is the one for events. The other 2 can enter the September cycle at the earliest, although immune-fi security seems to have reached some sort of compromise that puts the forwarding proposal on hold. Refer to that thread for more information. And we have 1 facilitator onboarding for Psychonaut, who is resubmitting a proposal to be onboarded as a facilitator for the immune-fi security core units. And finally, we have 3 amendments. The most recent one, which is eligible to enter the September governance cycle at the earliest, amends MIP 50, that is the direct deposit module, making it more general. The other 2 amendments that have been in RFC for some time now are one that amends MIP 0 and introduces retrospection dates for MIPs, and one that amends the coordinated forwarding process. As far as I know, neither of these is going to be entering the September governance cycle. And some important dates, as I said before, the ratification poll will close on Monday. And the latest date for introducing modifications to the proposals in RFC that are eligible to enter the August cycle is Wednesday, 27th. And I forgot to add in the slide that the formal submission window for August is opening on Monday, the 1st. Yep, and that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Pablo. And always nice to see those fresh graphics. Cool. That should take us to our forum updates. And it looks like Artem is ready to go on that.
Yes, posting the link really quick. All right. So, hey, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the GNR Forum recap. And we're going over the week of July 14th to the 20th. And so next slide really quick. And so just want to update on a couple of changes to both the forum recap and the forum at a glance publication. So the forum recap will be shortened to announcements and signal requests, and we're taking out discussions just to reduce noise and remove any redundancies, also help sort of make the GNR call more streamlined. And for the publications themselves, the descriptions for the posts, so the summaries, are shortened to about a couple of sentences to a blurb, but a little bit more streamlined and easier to navigate. As always, feel free to leave feedbacks or any opinions, doesn't matter good or bad. So at least I can know whether this helps or maybe if you would like it differently. And we'll get started with this week's announcements. First up, delegate migration. This is ongoing, and Duck's team developed a new governance portal feature that informs users when action is required, and it facilitates the migration process for both delegates and delegators. And this is important because delegation contracts are expiring, and due to this expiration, it requires action from both delegates and their delegators. Luckily for everyone, Dux provides a simple and visualized step-by-step action list within the post to make sure that everyone has a smooth migration. All they ask for is first expiration happens on Wednesday, so please check your allocation if you are delegating. That was a post by Peyton just now. But yeah, so all that Dux asks for is that for them to check out the thread, for both delegates and delegators to check out the thread and follow the instructions provided. The update is live and will be happening Wednesday. All right. Next up, we have the 𝘠 Foundation, who announced grant applications for scientific discussion papers that will be analyzing how DAOs manage intangible assets and intellectual property. The grant amount is up to 15,000 𝘠, and multiple grants may be issued. Now, the application submission will last until the end of this year, 2022, or until the grant amount has been fully allocated. And we're moving on to our signal request. There's currently one signal request happening, which will end on July 23rd. And that's by Hasu, recognized delegate. Hasu requests to reset his delegate participation and communication scores presented in the monthly delegate roundup. Hasu explains that his inability to attend previous votes made it difficult to recover his score because delegate scores considered the lifetime performance of delegates. And this request surfaced a lot of attention and some mixed feelings. Some people agree that Hasu's score should be reset with the hopes that he will improve it. However, others expressed that this can set a poor precedent for the future, and it's unfair to previous delegates as well, who were not able to participate in delegation due to any emergencies, and they're still unpaid or had their scores hurt for that. A common proposal mentioned throughout the response is to reevaluate delegation metrics and work with 𝘠𝑉_alpha to help improve on that, to help all delegates instead of just single ones. And pros from 𝘠𝑉_alpha responded as well by announcing that 𝘠𝑉_alpha is currently working on defining the delegate role and plans to submit a MIP, hopefully posted within the next upcoming weeks. The vote ends on July 23rd, and currently the majority vote does not support a reset for Hasu's delegation score. That's it for signal requests. So yeah, if you want a lot more information, the Forum at a Glance post does still contain the 3-point summary, all of the discussions, any evaluations and reports for the week, ongoing initiatives, and any help wanted. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Armin. And yeah, it's a nice slimmed down version, but do make sure to check out the post for a bit more details there. Awesome. As mentioned a few minutes ago, we do not have a initiative update today. However, we do have a couple items for discussion. Thomas, were you looking to introduce those? Happy to do so.
Yeah, Peyton, if you don't mind, I'll let you go ahead and open that up. That's it.
Right on. All right, if we go to the next slide, I think the first one up, yeah, is going to be AAVE's stablecoin proposal. So many who are paying attention might have noticed that AAVE had big news announcing that they will be kind of launching their own stablecoin. Obviously, that could be a competitor to 𝘠. So seems fairly reasonable that we might bring it up and talk about here in terms of governance and risk. Of note, I guess, is that their system setup for GHO is going to be quite different. Like there's going to be like designated mentors, I think who they call facilitators. So it won't be as permissionless as Maker's system. However, there are obviously a number of similarities. They're backing it with collateral already accepted at AAVE, etc. Yeah, I feel like that's probably pretty good background. If there is something else others would like to highlight, I'll give a moment here to do so.
Yeah, maybe I just I know the guy who wrote the proposal at AAVE, and I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to come on and present it? Because they want to do a lot of bridge building with Maker for some reason. And then he said, the guy who's doing the developer relationships would come on, but he turned in sick. He's willing to come on for another week if we still want that. So that's an option, but I'm sorry that he couldn't make it today.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Raphael. Would definitely be interested in hearing kind of more behind this proposal, but definitely fine to kind of keep the discussion more to our response, if any, to it, and if there's kind of any risk or governance considerations we should be having. Obviously, I'm less technical. I'm the governance facilitator, so the first thing that kind of came to my mind was our interactions with the D3M, right? And that we're kind of subsidizing their borrow rate for DAI, and if anything needs to change there going forward with this new stablecoin. Scanning through the chat here. Okay, so I would be curious to kind of take general thoughts on, what this means for Maker's future. Like, is this something we need to be worried about?
I could hop in for a sec if that's cool.
Go for it, Money.
All right. Yeah, I think AAVE is, I would say, the clear leader in like sort of like liquidity markets across not just Ethereum, but like most of the other EVM chains. So at least theoretically, depending on how they set up the parameters, they could, favor their own stablecoin versus others, or, kind of like tilt the field against us a little bit. So I think that's certainly something to watch out for. Like DAI has really great support from AAVE right now, which is actually like really helpful for DAI adoption across all these chains. But yeah, just something to like watch out for. If DAI starts to get iced out, then it would be yeah, just we would have to like think of what our alternative like options are at that point.
Definitely some good reflections there, Money Supply. Recognized delegate and does work for risk coordinating as well, for those who aren't aware. Reminder, if you did want to hop on the mic, you can always feel free to raise hands and I'm happy to call on you. But if no one's talking, yeah, don't hesitate to just hop on and go for it. Seeing some conversation in the chat kind of about the chain reliance for GHO. I don't know if that's something we want to explore.
I mean, isn't that kind of just like a design flaw that can be remedied at some point in the future? Is it like really fundamental to the conversation, I guess? Same thing with like DAI being a USDC wrapper. Like, yeah, like that's what it is right now, more or less. But there's stuff happening to try to alleviate that.
There's nothing happening to try to alleviate. AAVE is pretty committed to using Chainlink as their main oracle. I just throw it out there because it's one of the most compelling reasons I would personally not touch Go as opposed to DAI, which I do use.
Yeah, but it's not going to stop them from launching, and it's not going to stop like uneducated like retail and just even like educated.
No, that's right.
Using them.
No, I'm offering it as a way to compare the two. I think that people are going to be asking the question, why should I use DAI instead of Go? And to me, that's one of the most critical reasons.
Like in my conversations with them, they were like constantly reiterating that they want to grow alongside DAI and don't see it as a clear competition. I mean, I don't know what that means because clearly it is the same market, but at least the intention seems to be non-hostile.
Lip service.
Yeah, some people might have strong feelings either way, but definitely appreciate the perspective.
Stauny's a cutthroat.
Awesome. I do see a hand from Tim here, so I'll toss the mic your way. Sheepy.
Is it on me? Sorry, my internet glitched for a moment, Starlink. So just on Go, I think we should all relax a bit about this. So I don't know, I think it was in 2018 at Consensus in New York where USDC was announced that it's going to get launched. And by the time I was super scared being involved in Maker by the time a bit, at least in silent mode. Yeah. But if USDC wouldn't have launched, we would have had a very hard time defending the soft peg or the hard peg or whatever. So I think it was beneficial for us that the centralized stablecoin actually appeared. So either Go is, I don't even know, is it Go? How do you, well, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Either this is just not going to be relevant, then it's fine, or it's actually going to grow alongside us. I don't think we are in a consolidation phase for stablecoins yet. This is going to take a couple of years until we are going to have real competition on that yet, at least from my perspective. So I don't think we should be fearful or something like this. Yeah, that's just, maybe I'm just naive, I don't know.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. I mean, to your point, right, obviously, we're far from the only stablecoin on Ethereum. So this is in some ways more of the same, though perhaps it not being printed based on gathering fiat, right, does put them a bit closer to our business model and what we do. Awesome. 𝘊𝘰𝘳𝘕, I see a hand, go for it.
Oh, just one thing I've noticed, just from a narrative standpoint, it seems like some people are reading this as maybe a weakness of MakerDAO, or like a sense that, you know, the pressure is on us and other parties, you know, see an opportunity to take market share or kind of dominate. Again, I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying, Tim, as well. Like, but I just wanted to throw that in there because that's definitely some sentiment I've seen on Twitter and in direct conversations, that just the optics of it feels like a challenge. And does it reflect, you know, us losing our footing or kind of struggling in certain areas that have been well publicized?
Sure, definitely. Always hard to tell if it's the Zune or the iPad. That's second. iPod, I guess. David, I see a hand.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, like this is the business world, you know, this is people are out for our market share. DAI is our core product. You know, I don't think the level of, I guess, alertness coming from the community is overstated. I think it's very important for us to actually kind of consider this because it should inform the greater DAO about like the strategy, right? But yeah, so I think something that I find really interesting also in terms of narratives is the sort of cross-chain L2 future that Maker is pointing towards, and that AAVE is actually also pointing towards. AAVE already operates on certain other layer 2s and side chains, and I think that this GHO token, like, you know, it could very easily be what's the word, like integrated into all of their cross-chain activity. So it can definitely end up leading the way where DAI might not be leading. So they also might have, yeah, basically like first mover advantage on a lot of these side chains where Maker might not. So yeah, just something else that I wanted to bring into context.
Definitely appreciate it, David. Noticing some chat here about like Curve and, you know, potentially other protocols that could launch a competing stable. Cool. I think I haven't seen any other questions in the chat, so if I missed yours, please repost it or raise a hand. Go for it, David.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo like what 𝘊𝘰𝘳 said. Like it really is the network effects advantage. Like Maker had such a huge advantage because we were sort of first out of the gate with a very well-designed like initial working product, and also no other layer 2s, right? We were just on L1 and we, you know, we achieved, like we succeeded and we caught like a very large market share. But that may not be the case moving forward with other networks, right? We need to do what we can to keep up and put DAI in a position where it can benefit from these kinds of network effects.
I guess I have a question to offer here. I'm curious if anyone's looked into like kind of how DAI scaling tends to go with or against the general stablecoin market, right? Like thinking of the UST collapse, obviously there was a lot of contagion and a whole bunch of other factors that we can't get into in this call. But what was interesting was to see such a large competitor blow up and then see all the stable coins kind of tank in issuance around the same time, rather than like gaining to make up for the hole that USD had. So I'm just curious if that was particularly because of the large market effects, or like generally speaking, like with the addition of a new stablecoin, would we expect our issuance to go down proportionally? Cool, Raphael, you wanna go for it?
I think David was first. Oh, no.
Sorry, I had my hand raised from earlier. You go for it.
Yeah, just looking at the chart of share of the total stablecoin supply. So interestingly, DAI was 5% of the total stablecoin supply prior to the demise of UST, and is 4.5% after the demise. So actually, we lost 10% market share after the collapse of UST. And the biggest competitors are all centralized products. So Binance USD 11%, USDC 32%, and Tether 45%. So I mean, I don't know. I don't think that how you call it. I think the market is addressed in a different way. It's like it's really not about what you can do with the coin that I think that drives the market, and not about the technology behind it, because USDT and USDC are simply the most accepted stablecoins anywhere, and that's what drives their adoption. So I think if you want to grow DAI, doesn't really matter. What matters is where people can use DAI and for what they can use it.
Awesome. Thanks for bringing the data there, Raphael. And there's a link in the chat if anyone missed it. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, awesome. Lucas, you want to take it away? And then I'll get to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's my first time on a call, so happy to join these. This is really interesting. I've just been looking into Go. I think from my own perspective, the main advantages I've seen in terms of how they can get market share is, one, incentivize staked AAVE holders to use it by getting a discount. If you're staking AAVE, you get to borrow at a discount. So that seems to be one advantage. And then two, they seem to be timing it with their implementation of AAVE v3 so that it can be used with some of the updates they've made in terms of their portals, which would allow it to move quicker to other layer 1s and layer 2s, their isolation mode, so that could be used with more long tail assets, and then their efficiency mode, so it can be swapped quicker. I do think that they also did a pretty good job of borrowing a lot of concepts from Maker's design of DAI. And so things like the facilitators that they talk about is basically a direct replica of D3M, and imitation is the best form of flattery, right? But I think it does hopefully contribute and help the rest of the space by maybe hopefully driving some more innovation on the part of us at Maker and other stablecoins out there.
Right on. Well, first off, welcome, Lucas. It's great to have you on this call. Clearly, you spend a lot of time in this space, and it's really great to have your perspective here. Awesome. Well, I'll shift it to Chris Mooney before I get too far.
Yeah, that was a great analysis. I think it's good to sort of dig into exactly what their strengths are going to be, and also to the sort of previous comment from that. I do think that it comes down to ensuring that DAI is like usable in as many places as possible. And even though like DAI demand continues to sort of exacerbate our like USDC problem, it's still it's funny because 100 episodes ago, we were talking about how this is a good problem to have, right? So this is still a good problem to have because it gives us sort of options in the future. You know, with regards to like what people in the market prefer, right? So they either prefer, you know, sort of pure sort of crypto native, decentralized stable coins or the centralized ones. It seems like most users prefer centralized ones. The fact of the matter is, like, all of the sort of stable coins in existence, they have sort of, you know, let's say pros and cons, right? And we have such flexibility and such focus on just the stablecoin that I think our real job is going to be to make sure that we can benefit from all the pros that one would get out of, let's say, a purely decentralized stablecoin or a centralized stablecoin, right? And we should try and mitigate or risk balance the cons, right? So, you know, if USDC is like heavily subject to regulators, you know, we may have real world assets, but we can diversify those jurisdictions and help risk manage that sort of regulatory risk. And so I think that's what we should focus on. And we've got a couple tools that allow us to, you know, effectively inject DAI liquidity into markets. And so if AAVE really does attempt to sort of freeze us out, that would be still, I think, a pretty risky bet, simply because we have sort of D3Ms and strong tech staff and layer 2 strategies that allow us to basically inject DAI into competing products. So I think minimally, I think AAVE is going to be, you know, sort of forced to grow alongside us and play nice. And for the market, that's probably the better thing too, because, you know, users will have the options to switch between these things. But I think we should keep our eye on it. You know, they're fantastic at executing, and they've already got themselves on layer 2. We took a slightly different technical approach and worked out like the bridges, and we have sort of self-sovereignty over our own oracles. And so that we've been like working to ensure that we have sort of canonical DAI on all of these chains. And so as you can imagine, there are like 2 roads to get to the same place. They're taking one road, we took another. I think we're all going to end up in the same place. And at the end of the day, they're still going to be beholden to sort of Chainlink oracles. And, you know, there's a certain, like I said, there's a set of drawbacks from that. And I think that those drawbacks are pretty severe, that, you know, you can use the Chainlink multisig to basically, in a single block without a time delay, replace any sort of contract that feeds sort of price oracles to AAVE, and then AAVE basically can blow up just like that, which will also blow up GHO. You know, we've got a considerably better sort of Oracle infrastructure from a security standpoint, and also the OSM delay for a lot of the assets that we lend. So I think there's like I said, there's a whole set of trade-offs. Wherever we see them wildly out competing us, let's take that for what it is. That should be competitive pressure that shows us that we're failing. If we are 85% backed by USDC and users find this appalling and begin to use GHO as a result, let that be a signal to us that we need to fix the problem. So it's good that we'll have this pressure and the competition.
Right on. Thanks, Chris. Always nice to get your insight. I know I've read it in one of those kind of like vision and business books, so take it with a grain of salt. But that is one thing they always say is like, if you're focusing on your competitors, you're probably have already lost the game, because it's really your users and your product that deserves all the attention. Awesome. So I see Eric with your hand raised. Want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks. This is a great topic. I'm glad people are really following AAVE's new coin. One thing I do want to say is I wish we could get some data, like real market research data on what DAI users want and what versus what other stablecoin users want. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of a product. I mean, and the different stablecoins are just different choice sets for people to use for commerce. And you know, if you had to ask me off the top of my head, and just a guess, I think people want the safest collateral. It's the most liquid and it's the most widely available. I mean, that what seems like what most stablecoin users want. You know, and I don't think, I mean, we care a lot about regulatory risk, and I agree. But on the other hand, in the short term, my guess is most stablecoin users don't really care and don't see it as a big deal. So at the end of the day, I think we really should do more and more research on what these people who have stablecoins want, and really think, should we really make the best product for them, period. You know, we could say, hey, we want to over focus on regulatory risk versus what market demand is, and that's fine. But then we're really cutting down, you know, our market size, you know, consciously in the name of us perceiving a risk potentially bigger than the market participants do. And I think we just really have to understand much, much deeper what stablecoin users want. Is there any way to do like test groups, focus groups, you know, to really start getting real survey data from actual DAI users and other stablecoin users, and understanding what their core needs and concerns are, as opposed to us guessing it?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I might be wrong. I feel like this used to be kind of a focus of business development back in the Maker Foundation days. If someone wants to tell me I'm wrong, though, I'm more than happy to hear. Like, are there any efforts we know to kind of surveying DAI holders and figuring out like what they like and their reason for choosing DAI?
Hey, it's Eric. It feels like this is a huge oversight. I mean, we have 5.5 billion DAI out there to people. Why the hell do they want it? Why do they hold it or not versus the USDC? I mean, to me, it kind of boggles my mind that we're not obsessed on this. At the end of the day, if we don't grow that consistently, you know, we're going to shrink into irrelevance. You know, so what can we do to grow it? I.e., better understand what they want to meet their needs. To me, that's the North Star. Yeah, everything else is kind of white noise.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I guess for anyone on the call who's wondering how they can contribute to Maker and get involved in the ecosystem, definitely seems like a worthy start of something.
You know, like back in the foundation days, the vision and the use case for DAI was kind of manifesting really well in the South American markets. People liked using DAI. This is, you know, I'm talking about a time when it was relatively cheaper to transact on layer 1. People were using it and they liked it because they had, first of all, a currency that their government couldn't like arbitrarily just shut down. They basically were a little bit more sovereign. And also they were able to do it off of their smartphone. They were able to access financial services like collateralized borrowing, and even like a low risk, or, you know, quote unquote, risk-free rate, like in the form of the DSR. So that was the vision back then. Like, it was like, okay, get, you know, the people around the world who don't have access to like digital financial, you know, tools, access to these tools. And that was really good, but then layer 1 fees started going up and the entire retail market got priced out, and not only on the usage side, but also on the borrow side, right? So our product got completely blown up by layer 1 gas costs. And that is partly the reason why there is such a huge emphasis on the multi-chain world, because I think DAI, like one of the truest use cases for DAI really is, it lies with retail and it lies with emerging markets and it lies with being able to access these financial services that you would typically need to go through an intermediary for. So until we see like a layer 2 future that, or like a really, really popular layer 2 network emerge where there's a lot of retail and a lot of organic usership growth, I think like we should really just be heads down building. And to Brian's comment on the fact that we're focusing on following, I don't think that that's the right characterization. I think it's important to keep an eye on your competitors to see, if there's anything fundamentally threatening about them. I mean, we should still be focused totally on our own products, of course, you know. Yeah, sorry for the rant. Anyway, that's kind of like my view and where we've departed from it.
Yeah, definitely appreciate like the historical context from there too, David. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that GHO is going to suffer all the same end user gas expense pressures that we have on L1. They'll obviously be able to deploy this on their L2s as well, but so will we. So so they're kind of in the same boat as far as as it's going to be a hard time for them to try and like get GHO generation, and so
not an easy game to play for sure.
I mean, I find it interesting that one of their first moves is gonna, like with the whole facilitator mechanic, is to create a facilitator to market make GHO. So they're basically gonna be like market making with, uncollateralized stablecoins. Is my understanding. I don't know if that's right, but that might give them a significant advantage over DAI in L2 markets, because we don't have a market making strategy for DAI.
we do. It's just it's tied behind a couple technical pieces, right?
Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, we need not just the core, but probably the Vault engine in place on different L2s before we can start to do things like really spin up the sort of D3M to inject DAI into various protocols that exist. And I think all the entire toolkit of what we would need on those L2s is sort of dependent on us having MCD in those locations. So yeah, I mean, we've got a roadmap. So
and just for anyone who's unfamiliar, the DAI savings rate has been mentioned by like a lot of forward-looking plans, right, as a way to kind of continue to offer competitive advantages for utilizing DAI. But there are others. There are other ways to skin the cat, so to speak. Cool. So we want to make sure we have time for the next topic as well. So we'll kind of give a last call if there's any comments or questions you'd like on the AAVE GHO side. Last warning for putting them out there. All right, right on. Well, I appreciate the lively discussion. It's always nice hearing from so many different voices and perspectives. So hopefully we'll keep that energy going into our second topic. Thomas, if you want to hit the slide, thank you. So I believe the plan is to pass it over to Lit. If you can correct me on how to pronounce your name, that's how I've been referring to you, but I've been avoiding it. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you, and if you want to correct me on the handle pronunciation, please do so.
Cool. Thanks, Peyton. You had it right. It is Lit. Lit from Strategic Finance here, guys. And I recently created a forum post about the Maker token decentralization. I linked it in the chat. And basically, we can use this discussion segment to discuss any of the metrics views in that post, or just Maker token decentralization in general. If you have any questions on any of those metrics or views, I'm here to answer. You can also provide feedback on what else you would want to see from us on this topic. I've already gotten feedback, pretty good feedback on that it would be a good idea to also show views on actual like votes and how many entities the votes are coming from. So that's something that we'll include in the next round. So just to kick off this discussion, I pulled in one view into this deck that isn't the prettiest view, but in my opinion, it's the most important of them all. And I'll give a little bit of context first for those who haven't read the post. About 20% of outstanding MKR tokens were on the winning side of the most active vote in MakerDAO history. You guys are all familiar with that. It's the love vote. So it's pretty reasonable to conclude that as of right now, it takes 20% of MKR tokens to dominate any vote. And so this metric represents the amount of entities that hold the top 20% of tokens, or the minimum amount of entities that it would take to collude and dominate a vote. As you can see, it's bounced between 2 and 4, but it stayed mostly centered kind of around 3, and that's where it's at right now. I think we can all agree that this is definitely suboptimal long term. It's not very decentralized, but one thing I did want to engage with the community on is what would be more optimal. What number here would actually represent sufficient decentralization?
So I think that might be a tough question to answer, but maybe we can look at kind of the framing of it. So in terms of the number of wallets comprising top 20% of MKR tokens. So just with that as a starting point, I guess my question is, well, how do we impact this number? Because it seems like without convincing some of the big holders to sell, it would be hard to get this number to increase.
You can also
Yeah,
achieve it
that's true.
through
I
higher
think
vote participation, though.
Sorry.
Right.
Well, that might be another measure of decentralization, certainly. Are you going to say sorry, Lloyd, if we cut you off?
No. I think I was going to say something similar to what Mark said.
And go for it, Keandra.
Hi, yeah. Just a question. Did you look at the overall, like where all the supply is? So like, what are all the wallets that hold circulating supply? Do we know what percentage is held by third-party custodians, like in Coinbase, that we know requires a technical fix for the most part? We have in terms of participation, there's like a big technical issue in terms of maybe large holders that want to keep their MKR in the custodian rather than what's required to vote. So do we have like the big picture of this subset relevant to the whole ecosystem of wallets holding in institutions as far as we know?
We don't currently, but that's something we can look into next time.
I mean, on that, David, were you on the forum or Discord commenting about Coinbase saying Q4 they were doing something around enabling custodied MKR to participate in governance? Is anyone on this call who's been part of those conversations that can comment on the details?
Yeah, that wasn't me, so I have no comment there.
That might have been from the relay, I believe.
Was Dennis? Okay.
Yeah, it was Dennis. Yeah, from Docs. Yeah, I believe he spoke. From what I remember, they pushed it back to the end of the year, but that's all the information I really have.
That could really be a game changer, right, for all of us, and maybe it's just something to look forward to in terms of the communications and the narrative around wanting to engage more MKR is really advertising. I don't know if Coinbase would partner with us on that as kind of like supporting DeFi and governance and innovation or what have you, but I think that's an underappreciated detail. as to why more are not participating in governance.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not saying hold our breath. I'm just saying, like, let's lean in on it and plan for it and think about the ways that is impacting us. And if there's, relationships we have in the community that can bring pressure to bear on that. I mean, if that's an important unlock for the question, then I don't think we should just be passive about it. Maybe we need to be maybe we need to put more pressure on that solution being prioritized. I mean, it's certainly worth a shot, I think.
Yeah, I think institutional holders of people's assets, they are probably getting a lot of similar requests from different protocols because governance seems to be such a, I guess, popular thing within Web3 projects. Like everybody wants to have governance, and so I think it will happen. It's just a matter of time. Like obviously Coinbase is its own business; they're doing their own things. So yeah, I also wouldn't really hold my breath on timelines as they give them to us, but they have been supportive, at least in the way that they've acted and the way that they've spoken to us around accommodating delegation and voting for their institutional customers. But yeah, it's just a matter of timeline. But I don't know. I don't think it's just a MakerDAO thing. Like a lot of people want governance to be integrated with those kinds of custodians. So my bet is that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess to kind of build on that a little bit, like we have been successful in getting some custody platforms. Like Anchorage is probably the biggest. And the truth kind of boils down to if the person custodying their assets there, if it's important to them, like it'll get done. The problem is just like we don't see a ton of interest in participating in governance, right? Like if some of the big holders would threaten to leave Coinbase custody for Anchorage so they could vote MakerDAO, I have a feeling it would be fixed fairly quickly. But on our end, we kind of lack the leverage to make that happen, and really kind of are relying on MKR holders wanting to participate, particularly the large ones, in terms of the custody solutions getting solved. And yeah, we'll just give a huge shout out to Dennis, who's been working and acquiring a lot of those. I know it's not an easy topic right now.
And I'm curious about Paper Imperium's point that he believes that DAI as a stablecoin can be decentralized without necessarily the governance of the system being decentralized. And I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I think MKR token holdership should be sufficiently decentralized if DAI is to be considered a decentralized stablecoin. But then it's like you suffer the trade-off of not being able to make optimal or quick decisions if you're very decentralized, right? Because then you always have that political dynamic of one party or the other potentially swinging the votes and yada yada. But anyway, I digress. I see Simuni with his hand up, so go for it, man.
Yeah, I was just going to answer that. Like the sort of the theoretical path there would be like you could imagine a world where all MKR was controlled by one person. But that one person is constrained by, let's say, the contracts in such a way that they don't have enough power to, let's say, upgrade parts of the system, censor it, make it less trustless and whatnot. So there is a theoretical world where it doesn't matter if all MKR aggregates up to the hands of one individual, so long as the protocol itself is sufficiently immutable and sort of adheres to those sort of blockchain standards. So well, what I would call like probably first principles, right? So yeah, I mean, it is theoretically possible. Today, I think that there's a certain amount of risk of it aggregating into the hands of like too few people, because the system is sufficiently open enough such that at least like after you pass the GSM delay, you can upgrade many components and portions of the system and sort of change its sort of contract with users. Might be a good reason to have a larger GSM delay while so few MKR holders can impact the protocol so heavily. But yeah, there is a theoretical roadmap. So this is similar to what we did in single collateral DAI, where there are a number of like knobs that can be turned. And we created effectively in our terminology what we call a MOM, right? It was just a contract that all it could do was turn those knobs. And that constrained governance from being able to really mess too heavily with the sort of promise that the smart contracts had already made to users. So all they could do is twiddle these knobs. There is a world, like once we're pretty happy with like where DeFi is headed, when this layer of the protocol starts to like solidify, where we really can begin to sort of lock governance out of like core promises. For right now, I think those core promises are basically the DAI contract itself. So the DAI contract itself can't be mucked with. The DAI join adapter and let's say the VAT are kind of like immutable components. But of course, governance could still like walk in and through the VAT like completely manipulate all the backing behind DAI. And so as a result, you can't censor individual users at that granularity, but you could like censor the entire project as governance, right? So that's sort of the direction we should push in is push for an immutable contract, sort of like DAI. Governance can't really do anything unless they do it writ large, so they can't do anything to individual users. And then eventually, like if you can, sort of push governance even out of having the capability to do something like that. So yeah, sorry, long answer, but what Paper Imperium said is theoretically a possibility, even if MKR aggregates to the hands of a few.
Thanks for detailing that, Chris. Definitely kind of makes it interesting that there are so many different vectors for influencing the system, and governance, if you get control of it, you can do it all. So definitely a little scary. I saw a 𝘰𝘬𝘬𝘵 request, like maybe potentially more slides or kind of more things to talk about visually in terms of decentralization metrics. I don't know if there's any particular ones that might be helpful there.
I'll just jump in and say, I know for many of you all here, reading data and seeing charts, like you very easily grasp what's going on. I'm a very verbal person. Words, it's super helpful to just have like have some of it talked through a little bit. I'm sure there's others who like kind of glean information better in different ways. So I do definitely appreciate this being a topic on this call. But yeah, any other of the Dune charts you put together, any other comments, high level comments you could make about what you found and what you think it means would be awesome.
So I had access to the slide deck, so I went ahead and entered this one in. Don't feel the need to comment on it, obviously. But I don't know, what's really interesting for me on this one is it's organizing MKR holders by bucket of how much MKR they hold, how much is in the wallet. Unsurprisingly, that big orange section is the whales typically as we think of them. But we see that 1K to 10K MKR, like there's a lot of MKR in there. And that section is particularly interesting to me as someone pointing out wallet doesn't equal holder. Thank you. Always a good disclaimer. But what's particularly interesting to me about that kind of massive MKR is that mass is like pretty important for delegates, right? If they're able to get like somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 MKR delegated to them, that helps both with comp, but also with organizing, with politicking. So when I look at a chart like this, I see, oh wow, there's actually like a lot of like potential people that delegates might want to be targeting beyond what might be custodial solutions. So at least that's a little snippet of why I found this chart interesting and what I'm looking for is like on the governance side.
Is there anybody else who's on the call who would share how they're interpreting this data and its significance? That's what I love to hear from folks. Like I can look at this and I can see what it's saying to me, but I'm trying to like then make an association with, well, so what does it mean?
Probably want to classify how much of that was just lost keys. So how much of that is actually gone? People don't access it anymore. Like, you know, you could probably look at certain events in the past. If they haven't moved since then, maybe they're lost. But so you could maybe strike out like 10, 20%, maybe 0%. I don't know. You'd have to sort of categorize their behavior based on that. But maybe these are old holders just disenfranchised with the project and have no interest in participating, selling, or buying or anything, and have just, you know, done well doing other things, and maybe never will participate. I don't know who these people are.
Yeah, you shared in chat earlier, Bourbon, that like 53K MKR that was upgraded from the old token, the new token never moved.
Not even delegated. Not. I mean, they didn't vote. Like, never entered the voting contract. So that's, yeah. I don't know what they might.
Cool. And got confirmation there, Brian, that the delegate contracts were excluded from that query, which is good because that would kind of knock out my point.
For me, like, I think what's more interesting is the voter behavior, because like it can still be, I think you will always have these kind of power laws in everything that can be traded financially. It's just kind of unavoidable. Like you see that across the board. And then it's like, but how does it affect the actual governance? Because that's like where the rubber hits the road in terms of decentralization. And so I think that that's something that's kind of missing from this analysis.
So I see. Oh, did you want to go, Brian? I see your chat box lighting up, but I don't hear anything. Might be a mic issue. So I see Bourbon asking in the chat, what in general is the goal of predicting their behavior, particularly if people haven't participated in years. You know, different people might respond to that differently, but I would say in terms of this analysis, right, we're not necessarily looking to predict their behavior as much as to just see like, all right, well, how decentralized actually are the governance holdings for the Maker protocol, and what does that mean for us in terms of building a decentralized system.
Yeah, I think it's also useful, you know, once we're defining decentralization and think about the ways that it's important in the many ways to define it, one of them being if there is a regulatory definition of decentralization that ties to holdings of governance tokens, you know, that's something very concrete we could apply as a reason to understand this information and, you know, kind of come up with something that's maybe more optimal, and then figure out what does it look like to move in that direction, because it just feels like we're stuck to just kind of in a generic way say, how do we get more governance participation, and like in what ways, and then what exactly are the limitations of that we can address. And so, you know, I think, and also, you know, to Raphael, your point, like coming at it from both ends, like analyzing the data, but then also defining to what extent, I've thought about with delegates, right? Like, well, how we have a very open system, it's very easy to come on and be a recognized delegate. Is there an optimal number of delegates? Is there an optimal kind of distribution of MKR relative to who the holders of that MKR are? And, to what extent are we as a community thinking about really architecting what decentralization means from a data perspective, from a wallet perspective, and then, governance, all that.
Thanks, Qianga. Not sure I have necessarily the answer, but there are a few things I tend to think about a lot, right, when thinking about protocol governance. I'm not sure if there's a magic distribution or number that like really enforces it. I'm sure mathematically you can probably model it fairly easily, but when we think about the strength of the system, it really is having a number of different delegators, or a number of different delegates, preferably from different delegators as well, right? So they're not beholden to one delegator's particular point of view. But basically, like the more stakeholders you have and the less aligned those stakeholders are, like you can expect either us to get like really better governance out of it, because we'll have to be compromising and making things happen, or just things will stop getting passed because compromise can't be reached. So that is like the potential downside of like, kind of decentralizing to such an extent that that a majority coalition doesn't remain. But so far in maker governance, like we've mostly seen proposals pass. We've mostly seen things getting approved by voters and delegates. So I don't think we're anywhere near that problem yet.
I mean, I think to Qianga's point, the really important question is, how do you incentivize participation? I think that's a really, really very important point, and I don't have an easy answer there, but I think, yeah, maybe you have to pay for voting, but then it opens up a lot of, like, a whole can of worm of problems. So I don't know, it's not easy, but I think it's something that we definitely should think about and experiment with also. It's like, it's not kind of set in stone the way we do things at the moment, I think.
And I think it's also not just quantitative, right, in terms of incentivizing. And I'd encourage us to think about, and we do in many conversations, like, what are the, I'm always the one to talk about, like, what are the emotional reasons people do things? What's the psychology behind it? But that's powerful too. So I think it's just not about finding some magic, token structure, but it is also about culture and other momentum and, identity and kind of, these other dimensions that make people want to participate. But, I also would say that participation is important to feel that your contribution that can be heard or can make a difference as well. And so maybe one of the challenges we have, and we've talked about it, is it's and we're working on it in many ways, but it's very intimidating to like approach MakerDAO, and we're working, and we got to really keep working on these composable ways for people to engage with conversations or in conversations, because I think that sense of satisfaction that, like, I'm going to participate and I'm going to be able to make an impact, even if it's not like I'm going to be able to convince the whole community to vote on X, but just some outlet that you feel that, oh, other human beings in the community, like, will see you, will care that you're there, will, take on board what you have to contribute. So I think all of those things are part of incentivizing participation, and maybe that's even the secret sauce is at those more grassroots granular level, then figuring out how to get all the whales. And the whales will also follow the energy as well. So like a groundswell of little people taking an interest in engaging probably also is a big signal that whales will look at.
Thanks, Qianga.
MakerMan is not sustainable long term. Yeah, so sorry, Qianga, but yeah, so I think the way to get people back is, I mean, or if we want, is you do have to offer something. We did have the burn, but it was a little bit too intangible. I felt like governance could just sort of handle it, and then you could earn yield with your maker somewhere else, which was a trap, of course. But something that you know, makes it more advantageous to keep your maker in the voting contract locked in there. It's just, you know, the burn, maybe a slight emission of some kind, but not. I mean, I'm personally not in favor of expanding the supply, but some of the revenue gets shared to whoever is in governance, right? And then if you're not, you don't get that share of the revenue. And I would picture a decent number of maker coming back to participate. Yeah, just introduces something like that.
Thanks, Bourbon. Kind of talking about the pros and cons of, I guess more so the pros of kind of paying for participation.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of the trap I fell into myself. I mean, I was like, well, I'm just paying to have my maker in the voting contract. Have you thought about yield farming alchemics? I'm not, I mean, okay, well, and then, yeah, that's a slippery slope. And, but yeah, the yields are better elsewhere, right? It should be financially the most, you know, the biggest incentive should be to have your maker in governance, not somewhere else, Lent or anything else.
Thanks, Raven. Raphael, want to go for it?
Yeah, because I think like one easy way to tie it all together is like, for instance, if we say, hey, we just like we want to grow DAI adoption in the real world, for instance, then you can kind of, for instance, incentivize all these grassroots communities that bootstrap DAI demand somewhere and they get recognized, you know, by the DAO or by something. Because I think at the size the DAO is at the moment already, it's pretty hard, you know, like everything focusing on the center, it's just too much. It's like one person, not every person of 200 people can make a difference to the 200 others, but in smaller groups, it's much easier. So if you have these things where you move out of the center and towards the edges, and the edges do actual meaningful work that helps the whole, then I think you can get these kind of things going. And I think actually that's what Endgame is also trying to solve for, is to push a lot more participation to places where it can matter.
Definitely. And I don't know, longtime community members are aware these aren't new topics, right? Like one of my first projects when I joined Maker was to look into like voting or staking rewards. Yeah, it's kind of funny how things keep revolving and coming back. Seen a few pitches for talking about delegate comp, so we'll make sure to note that down and keep that as an option for a future call. Yeah, Raphael pointing out we still have 9 minutes. So questions, anything people haven't got addressed, now would be a great time to do so. Yeah, go for it, Mooney.
Yeah, I mean, if no one else is going to talk, I feel like there's a bit of a tradition here. So on the governance call, that was episode 100. which I think was like 2 years ago at this point. I'm trying to remember back. It's like Cyrus was there, Rich. So Cyrus was head of risk, and Rich was doing governance, and Mariano was my boss. So way back in the day. We were struggling, I think, just with this like insatiable DAI demand, and we didn't have yet like a PSM or sort of great ways of like dealing with this. And at the end of that call, I kind of came on and said, like, look, this is a really good problem to have, right? Like a lot of startups would die, to have basically this level of demand. And so, this is really like an opportunity or a problem that is an opportunity. And so I guess we're really in like no different a situation. It's just that, the circumstances changed 100 episodes later, right? So 2 years later. So my prediction is by the 300th episode, it'll be the same exact thing, right? It'll be, we'll have some insane problem and everyone will be fighting about it and trying to figure out how to solve it, but we'll be able to think about it as an opportunity. Yeah, I didn't really like it. This is kind of like off the cuff. I was working on reviewing the spell that we're going to have for HVD and SocGen, which is, I guess, part of the solution to solving the USDC problem. So I don't know. I'll try and say a few words. I know over like the last couple months, like there's been a lot of kind of strife and struggle in governance. In fact, I would say probably for this entire year, I think a lot of that comes out of the difficulty of trying to manage, at least from my vision, it seemed like it began to emerge out of trying to manage the concept of real world assets. And I think that's a very difficult thing to manage, I think, on the sort of software side, right? If there's an unsafe construction or things are difficult, it's pretty easy to point at an unsafe construction or give a proof of concept or why there's like an exploit or a bug or something doesn't work. And I think it's much more opinion based in the real world aspect. And I feel like that has led to an overall sort of crisis of governance that bubbled up. And so now, like the last so many months, like there's this sort of big struggle to sort of re-architect governance. And I technically have a dog in that fight, but I wanted to kind of like leave you guys with maybe some hopium. So like me personally, there was a discussion, I don't know, I think maybe on like Hasu's call when he was proposing his constitution DAO about sort of first principles. And I don't know if it's going to be easy for all of us to agree on first principles, but I can tell you that sort of my first principles for working in this space, and they come out of like sort of wisdom and experience of seeing kind of what people do, what humans do, what governments do, is that the stuff that we build on blockchains, that this like horribly slow, terrible infrastructure for trying to build stuff should be trustless. It should be permissionless. It should be censorship resistant, and it should be decentralized. And where we lack in one of those, we can lean on another to try and mitigate its sort of downsides, right? And to that end, I use those as my sort of true north. Like, so when we give a new proposal, something is coming up, even like with real world assets, I say to myself, well, these aren't necessarily trustless. They're not permissionless. They're not censorship resistant, and they're not decentralized. And whenever we encounter something like that, I think the right solution is for MKR holders to try and like risk mitigate that. But on the purely technical side, we do have a lot going for us. So growth members and Oracle members and collateral engineering services and protocol engineering just had an offsite where we discussed the sort of roadmap and the sort of technical hurdles and the difficulties, and really like played adversary and tried to scrutinize the sort of technical implementation of our teleport product. and and tried to map out the sort of expansion of multi-collateral DAI into various layer 2s and other side chains. And I can tell you that when designing that tech stack, the answers for trustlessness, permissionlessness, censorship resistant, and decentralized were very, very solid. We put those principles above everything else. And I believe that that's going to give the DAO over the next 300 episodes, the next 2 years of growth. I think that's going to give us the sound foundation in order to build something that at its core adheres to those principles and should allow us to sort of compete. It should allow us to be resilient, and it should allow us to give something to users that they want. In the end, I still believe that we're building effectively the escape hatch for possible like cataclysmic financial ruin in the future from traditional finance or macroeconomics. And I think that everyone should keep that like first and foremost in their minds, that when the time comes, we want to be able to offer humanity a viable sort of alternative, because I don't think that whatever they force us to take is going to be any better than what we can offer voluntarily to them. So just know that with all the governance strife and trying to figure out what we do with governance, that we're still building like a tech stack that adheres to those principles, and that there's a good reason to be like optimistic about the sort of future mission of where we're taking things. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Can I echo Chris with some hopium? So I said this in another call. If people had asked us 2 years ago whether we'd have 100 million in the surplus buffer and hit 10 billion DAI outstanding, they probably would have laughed at us. And so, I come to Vitalik. It isn't about beating everybody. It's about outlasting them. And I agree with Chris that Maker and DAI, particularly DAI as the product, as the escape hatch for possible future financial apocalypse, is probably a good goal to have. And whether we can get there or not, who knows? I'm stepping down, I'll step aside, but I'm convinced that the players here potentially can make that happen as long as people keep the noses to the decentralized grindstone. And with people like Chris and the teams that we have, I think we can do that. Maker's been in front of a lot of things, and I don't doubt that it will continue to be so. So wish you guys all the best. By the way, today's my birthday. Take care, everybody.
Right on. Happy birthday, Maker Man. Always fun having the GNR birthdays. Well, I am noting we're at time here. This has been like a really energizing call for me. So thank you, everyone. If I could just spend one last note on this occasion of our 200th call. I think a lot about what kind of got me to join and the early governance and risk calls I attended as a contributor. And I think for me, what really brought it home was some of the stuff 𝘱𝘰𝘮𝘰 was talking about with I came to the forum to complain about a parameter change, and while most people told me I was still wrong, they kind of acknowledged where I was right. They said, this is why we disagree, but these points are strong. And I think what really made me fall in love with the Maker community was this idea of pushing for the best solution, of taking different perspectives and trying to find the one that's going to make the most amount of sense to the most amount of people. Yeah. Chris, I see you might have a final thought. Is that just a Zoom phantom? Might just be Zoom phantom hand raise. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for being
Forgot to lower it.
Thank you everyone for being a part of this community. It's truly a pleasure to have you on this call, and I really look forward to seeing what happens in the next 100 episodes. Thanks everyone. See you next week.